thanks for joining us for a special question and answer session with Falkirk Chairman Gary Deans. Unfortunately, Falkirk FC were forced to cancel their fans forum at the beginning of this month owing to the coronavirus pandemic. But with many questions hanging in the air over the current situation, we've asked you to send your questions into the Falkirk Herald. I'm David Oliver, the sports editor at the Herald, and I'll put these questions to Gary, who's been heavily involved in many of the talking points both at the club and in Scottish football this month. Gary, thanks for coming on. How have your 9 months been?
Thank you. And listen, before we even start, I apologise to everybody. We're having to do this obviously at distance, and also my computer now and again will ping and I can't figure out how to turn it off. So if that interrupts any questions or anybody's hearing, I apologise.
So how have your first 9 months been since joining the board?
Interesting. We've not had our challenges to seek. I said at the AGM that I was looking forward to the challenge. It's a privilege, and I genuinely mean that. As a Falkirk fan since 1969 or 1970, I can't quite pin down the year. But as a local boy, it's been an absolute privilege to be chairman of the club. Never thought that was something that would happen, not far less being on the board. However, it could have picked a better time and under better circumstances, both in terms of where we find ourselves football-wise and in the League One. Also, the challenges of changing manager, moving forward under new leadership with David and Lee, and then of course this. A truncated season and the coronavirus crisis that we all found ourselves in. So yeah, it's been a steep learning curve.
I didn't expect 9 months ago you'd be on Radio Scotland. You applied Sky Sports News.
No. It's people have been asking me my opinions, and maybe I'm wrong to be able to share them as often as I do. But I think if something needs to be told or needs to be said, and certainly something on behalf of Falkirk Football Club, that we should be out there shouting about it.
Yeah, it's an interesting time with the reconstruction talks, which I know that you're involved in.
Yeah, I had a call with the SPFL with Neil Doncaster just following the vote to end the season, and we were talking about the reconstruction, and we had obviously put a firm line in our correspondence with the SPFL at that point. We did write a letter alongside our no vote saying that we strongly believed, as we've done for very many years, in league reconstruction. So Neil did say to me, look, should you think about putting yourself forward? When I said, well, kind of minded to, he was encouraging me to do so. I then got a call from Les Gray asking me to go into the group. So we were kind of swithering about that anyway. When Les Gray came forward and asked us to, it seemed to be a no-brainer. Why either go along with these things and try and influence from the inside, or sit in the sidelines shouting at it. And my decision, or our decision collectively, was better to be in arguing for our case and trying to get the best outcome for ourselves, but also for everybody else. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. So in a few meetings so far, one of the questions that's come into is how confident are you that the league reorganisation will be accepted, and is it feasible within the Budget's 3-week time frame?
Yeah, I think it is. Listen, I'm as sceptical as any other Falkirk fan, because we've been on the receiving end of quite a few bad decisions over the years, whether that's been back to Brockville days and not being promoted, or various other decisions over the years. As I've said, we've been strong proponents of reconstruction for many years, and it's always something that we believe in because we just don't think that the current league structure is all that attractive. And if you look at it from a fan perspective, and as a fan, the 4 times a season and 4 games a season against one club, and if you get them in the cup games, maybe 5, maybe even 6 games a season, it's sterile. It doesn't make for an exciting format and an exciting spectacle. So I think it is possible. I've gone in sceptical, but wanting to be convinced. I've become more and more hopeful that we're going to get a positive outcome in this. Certainly, there's more club support and change than I thought would be the case. And I think that's because of the exceptional circumstances that we find ourselves in. And there's recognition that the unfairness of ending the season early and the unfair outcomes in that, particularly in relegation, but also in terms of promotion and playoff games not happening. So I think there's more of an appetite for change than there's been ever from that point of view. I think on the timescale question, David, Anne Budge's suggestion of 2 to 3 weeks, is that doable? It's certainly doable by the end of May. If you look at the possibilities, yeah, there's hundreds of possibilities and everybody's got a variation in them. But they boil down to 2 or 3 real strong ones. So I think it's a question of focusing in on the really strong propositions, working those through and getting it out to the clubs. I think that's perfectly doable by the end of May.
Does that come as just a 1-year plan, or is this a long-term change for the league setup? One of
the couple of words that all of the group are deliberately shying away from is temporary or permanent. The view is that this has to be a staged process. So you're looking at stage one. Stage one, what do we do now to be able to take us through the current crisis and make sure that as many clubs can get through this in as fair a state as possible and as healthy a state as possible. Then during that stage one process, we'll look at stage two. What's stage two? Do I think that needs to be at least, we've suggested 3 years, stage one? Yes. I've heard another suggestion that it's a 5-year suggestion. So I think that stage one process is not a 1-year season, a 1-year adjustment, and then back to the norm. We've put forward strongly, and a lot of others have too, that the Premier League structure moves to a 14, and that's a permanent move rather than a temporary one, to avoid the cliff edge of relegation at the end of that. Now, that seems to be acceptable, or seems to have a chance of success, and albeit, as I said earlier on, everybody attached to Falkirk and others will be slightly sceptical about that.
So does this, obviously the outcomes of these talks will come to a decision which will then affect the plans for next season, how you go about your planning for Falkirk next season?
Yeah, and I realise that a lot of people will want answers as quickly as possible. All I can say is we're looking at every scenario that we can possibly look at. Until we know which season, which league we're going to be playing in, whenever the season does start again, and we can maybe go into that when in due course. That changes our budget. Not only that changes our budget, but what the outcome after we get back to some kind of normality, whatever that normality is, and people have been reading news and watching the news and TV, and nobody's talking about being able to go back to what we had in terms of a society anytime soon. So that's going to affect our income, because people won't be coming to games as readily if there's social distancing being imposed or still in effect. That will affect some people's decision as to whether they want to be able to come, whether they can or not. But some other people might just be nervous about coming to games. So it's going to hit our income, we think. Sponsors might not have as much money because their businesses are going to be hit. So there's all sorts of things that are going to impact upon our budgets going forward, and we'll need to plan carefully about that. That's why we're not rushing into any judgments or any decisions at the moment, but we are looking at these things constantly.
In terms of the talks, are you going to take things back to the fans, or are the fans going to be involved in these reconstructive talks at a further stage?
Well, the answer is it's not really my decision. It was talked about last week in terms of fan consultation and making sure that supporters' federations or supporters' bodies are listened to as part of this. So yeah, that's the intention.
So thanks for that. One of the other subjects, obviously following on from talking about next season, is how things will go on the park and for the squad. Quite a few questions have come in about the management team going forward. So the contracts for David and Lee were up until the end of the season. Is there anything further on that?
We're in discussions with Lee and David at the moment. Look, without giving anything away, we're very happy with Lee and David. So we're still talking to them. It's complicated by the fact that they're on furlough at the moment. We can't do things in the way that we would normally expect to be able to do things. We were thinking about this in terms of where we were at the start of the season, our decisions to change, and what's the difference in the feel about the club at the moment, albeit it's kind of in lockdown. The difference is in Lee and David, we've seen a real lift in terms of the atmosphere within the club. We've got leadership off the park and to a large extent on the park as well that wasn't necessarily there before. Now, that's not to be critical of the previous managerial structures or regime. It's just that these guys have come in and they've shown that leadership and leaders' qualities that we want from them. So yeah, we've seen real improvement, and it would be silly not to continue with that under the guys. So yeah, we're speaking to them, and we want to be able to conclude things as practically and as soon as we can.
Does that follow on for players' contracts and talks in terms of extending people's contracts, maybe bringing in new players? So a lot depends again on the outcome of these reconstruction talks.
It does, and also in terms of when do we think we'll be able to get back playing. I think there's a lot of people will have listened to radio and again read press about what's driving certain clubs' decisions on the vote and in the past few weeks and ongoing. I think a lot of that's to do with player contracts, not about the money coming in from the SPFL. That was helpful to a lot of clubs, but this is really driven by player contracts. So the player contracts will, in the main, if they have a contract that's going to be terminated or finished, it will finish round about the 10th of June. There's a few days difference, but that most clubs got the players' contracts will end in the 10th of June. Obviously, some clubs, us included, have got players on 2-year deals. So that doesn't bite in this for this June. However, some players will be out of contract after the end of June, after the 10th of June. The issue then is what do you do? Do you decide to be able to extend these contracts if you want these players to be able to be continued for next season when you don't know when you're going to be playing again? And you don't have any revenue coming in. So every club, like and Falkirk included, are in the situation where you're looking at how do we generate revenue to be able to make sure that we can continue to play or continue to pay the players that we want to be able to have with us next season. So that decision is even more complicated than the decisions over managerial contracts, for example. And we just need to take our time and know certain things have to fall into place before we can decide what's the best way to take that forward.
Mentioned on the radio, I think a fortnight ago, 10 days ago, that there's enough cash to go to see the club through this initial period of the close down, maybe till the end of June or so. What happens after that in terms of cash flow?
Well, the cash flow again, it's dependent on the contracts. If we have it depends on a range of factors. Depends on what players are going to be here for next season, or what wage bills we have going through the summer. It depends on what the furlough scheme, the government furlough scheme, does. If the government furlough scheme continues, we've got sufficient money to last us quite a long time. But we've decided that we would pay 100% of people's wages, not the 80%. So we've got room for manoeuvre in that, but also we've got enough money to be able to do that for quite a bit of time. If the government furlough scheme ends, and it's not just us that will be in trouble there. If the government furlough scheme ends, then we'll have to reappraise. Do we have enough money to be able to get back to the start of a normal season, whenever that would be? Yes, we do. However, if the season doesn't start until January or February or whatever, we'd have to have a look at things again. So again, there's scenario A, B, C, and D, and we regularly meet, talk, and discuss every single one of these.
So there's several plans sitting there ready for whatever variable in terms of the government reconstruction talks, how things go with players. That's the forward plan. There's several forward plans then just waiting to be enacted.
Yeah, to say that they're written formal plans would be wrong, but we know the set of circumstances we've got to be able to have a look at, and we're planning for each of these scenarios. So it's very, we have to be proactive, but you're also a bit reactive because you're relying on other people, whether it's the SPFL stating when they're going to be able to start games again, what leagues of people are going to be in, what their government schemes are going to extend. But also we're looking at, well, how do we plan for what squad do we want, who's going to be signed, and so on. So there are some things that are in our control, there's some things that are not. So you've got to have a look at it from both sides.
Have talks began with players over potentially coming back or extending their deals?
There's been some initial discussions, but again, these are very difficult because of furlough. So when players, in this instance, are on furlough, they're not allowed to work. And that doesn't mean that we can't have a discussion about contracts, for example. But you've got to be very careful about that. Also, we're not yet in a time or at a time where we've got a transfer window. So again, you've got the football regulations, you've got the furlough regulations, and you've got what's sensible from a business point of view to be able to do. So again, yeah, we're planning, but we're planning with all of that in mind.
That also makes things like season tickets difficult as well to plan for, which I think quite a few people are beginning to look at, and if they'll be available soon. Obviously, with so much up in the air, it's still a bit quite far away.
I've had some emails and some chats with people about season tickets, both from what's happened with last season's season tickets, and we'll maybe go back to that in due course, David, but also when are we going to be launching season tickets. There's two things that are driving that from my point of view. Is we don't need to be able to sell season tickets just now. So there's not a cash crisis that we're seeing to be able to resolve. Now, that's not to criticise other clubs, but other clubs need to be able to raise money quickly, and we don't. So we've got the luxury of a bit of time to do what we think is the right thing. The other thing about that is it right to go off and ask people to be able to part with money when it's difficult for everybody in terms of their own jobs and their own income levels. So we've got both of that in our mind. Now, there will come a time when we'll be coming out with a package to say, well, okay, well, now we know where we're going to be playing, or we think we know where we're going to be playing. Do we know whether it's going to be in front of crowds or behind closed doors? No. But we'll come to that point where we'll have a package that we've got more visibility about, that we can say, well, actually, here's the offer that we want to be able to make, and here's the support that we need from our fans. And hopefully the fans will back us when we get to that point. We are working on that, and without praising him too highly because his head will get too big, and Kieran Kazari, we've got one of the most innovative commercial directors you could find in Scottish football, and a lot of people really like some of the ideas that Kieran has around this. So we've tasked Kieran with thinking about what is the right packages for us to be able to roll out. But again, we need a few more weeks to go by before we're in a position where we know we've got an offering which looks sensible.
You mentioned there about closed door games. What's your opinion on that going forward? Is that a viable option, or?
I think at some point, I mean, the government want football back. They wouldn't. I don't think they publicly stated that, but there is a report in the press I was reading this morning. Certainly from an English football point of view, the government are quite keen on getting football back on the telly, because it gives us all something to watch other than constant updates on the coronavirus. So yeah, I think that's a strong possibility of getting closed door games on. I'm much more, again, use the word sceptical about getting crowds back anytime soon. If there are crowds, it's going to be restricted. But somebody pointed out to me over the last few weeks, or a few people have pointed out to me, I mentioned about people's reluctance to come back if they've got underlying health conditions and so on. So you're going to have an effect on crowds. You've also got the social distancing measures, which means you've got to have a 2-metre circle around everybody that's sitting in the stadium, if anybody at all. So think of it practically. You've probably got a couple of seats on either side of you and in front and the back that you've got to be clear. So that restricts the number of people. That's doable. It gets more difficult if you start to think about how do you get people in and out. What about the public concourse areas? Buying a pie, doing whatever, going to the toilet. These things are really difficult to be able to manage with any kind of crowd. So I'm more cautious about us getting a crowd back than I am towards closed door games. A lot of clubs are, certainly lower league clubs, are talking about having, I think, they've not said this publicly, no football until we can get crowds back. And I think the rationale for that was pretty obvious. If you've no crowds, you have no revenue, but you're still playing players. So I think there's some clubs out there, I know there are some clubs out there that don't want that. They don't want any football until we have crowds back at all. Now, that's not us. We can think of restricted crowds. Could we manage it? Probably. We've got Falkirk TV. Do we wrap that up into a season ticket package, for example? Yeah, it's complicated because at the moment the SPFL rules mean that you can't live cast games, but that's got to change. If we're having closed door games, that's a rule that has to change. So all of that needs to be looked at, pulled together, and given to people as a kind of, well, here's your menu of options. What do you want in terms of our season ticket package going forward? And also recognising the fact that we've had fewer games for this season's season tickets than everybody paid for. So the ability for us to have a look at that and say, well, actually, here's our package that reflects all of these factors, and can you back us, guys? Take us forward into the next season when we can hopefully challenge.
Yeah, so restricted attendance would affect the income as well, wouldn't it? There would be less money, less people come through the doors, less money coming in.
Yeah.
Is there insurance that can cover that drop?
No. There's a lot of talk about insurance cover for COVID. I've heard stories. We don't have insurance to be able to cover us for this. I've heard a lot of stories about clubs that do have and some that don't, and some that thought they had and don't. So there's one club that I know does have, and they have it. What one of the directors told me was they have it, but they didn't think they had it. They've got it almost by default. They didn't realise they did. There's a few clubs I know, or a lot of clubs I know, that don't have any cover. There's one club that was quite public that said they did have it, and when we went to their insurers said, because the outbreak didn't generate from your club, you're not covered. Now that's outrageous, but because their club itself wasn't a centre of an outbreak, they're not covered.
There's no centralised insurance for SPFL that would cover.
No.
That's as far as you know.
No, the SPFL structure, as far as I'm a new boy to all this, but as the SPFL structure is to organise the competitions, give us structure around the leagues and so on. But these are areas, insurance and so on, that are for the clubs themselves.
The club welcome something like a GoFundMe page. You know, Raith Rovers have had a successful crowdfunder over there, and there's another experienced it.
Again, I'll go back to I suppose my inbuilt caution about this. We're not in the position we need to be able to raise money quickly, as Raith Rovers were, and they were quite public about the challenges that they were facing. People have been supporting us in fantastic ways, either emotional support or emails and so on. We've had some tremendous support from that side of things. Things like the games on the Saturday, that are the old games that are being streamed on Falkirk TV, getting sponsorship in, the 50-50 half-time draws. These are not huge amounts, but they're really valuable amounts. And it shows there's an appetite out there to want to be able to help us, to help support us. What we want to do is to ask supporters to be able to back us and help us when we can, and when we've got the right package to be able to put together. I don't want to be able to just go around with a bucket asking for money for the sake of it. I want people to know where that money is going to go, and I want people to know, understand where we're going to invest it. So this is about us putting a package together, not as a rescue bid, but to be able to structure something going forward that makes it an attractive club for people to come and watch, play for, and hopefully build success.
Well, in terms of the season that's just passed and the season ticket which was incomplete, is there a refund process there for anybody that wants it?
We want to pull together a package that says here's it reflects that there was 4 home games that people didn't see that they paid for, but also to reflect that in the package going forward. Might it be an option? We've not concluded one way or the other. Might it be an option to say, yeah, look, if you want a refund, you can get a refund? Yeah, that's a possibility. But what I want to do is to put that together and say, well, actually, if you don't need the money and you want to be able to help us, reinvest it. Invest it in the club and help us build going forward. So we're working on plans about what does that look like, what benefits do you get as a result of that reinvestment of that cash that you paid for this year, and show what the plan is for taking this forward. That's what I mean about being planned about it, not reactive. Some clubs have had to go out and had to do this. We're not in that position, but I understand that people want to be able to see something coming through. In the next few weeks, let's say by the end of May, we should be in a position to be able to pull that together. So hopefully by the end of May, we've got clarity around what league we're going to be playing in and what the possibilities are, whether it's going to be closed doors or in front of crowds, what our season ticket package is, and what options we've got for supporters to be able to support us going forward. So that's the timescale that we're working to, and I would hope that people give us that bit of breathing space to get it right.
Talk about investment there. Is there any? It's a low level investment of four games worth of income. Is there any large scale investment on the horizon, or was there before the lockdown?
I've had a few calls for people who want to, for want of a better phrase, kick the tires. What I said at the AGM, at that point, I think there was 2 groups who had come forward and said that they were interested in finding more about Falkirk and investing or buying Falkirk. And what I said at the time still holds. They sign a non-disclosure agreement to be able to get any information from us at all. But a precursor for them to be able to get any information is for them to tell us quite a lot of information about them, what the plans would be, where do they see the investment requirements, what investment would they be willing to put in, and so on. Fair to say that all the non-disclosure agreements or any non-disclosure agreements that I've put out, we get maybe 40% of the information that we want, and then it kind of just dies. Now, that's not dies because they don't become interested. It's just that they don't come forward with the concrete proposals that we need to be able to assess. So, as far as I'm concerned, at the moment there are no serious proposals on the table for that. I do get calls, and I had a couple of calls last week about people saying, would we be interested in investment? And the answer is, well, tell us more, and then we'll have something to talk about. But that's their job to come forward, not me to be able to go out and do something about. So what we're planning for is to raise money on our own behalf and raise investment on our own behalf. So it's likely that we'll be having a share issue, and the timing of that and the price of it, everything else, that's been looked at and with a lot of care. But the timing of it is crucial. We want to make sure that we're asking people to be able to back us when it's the right time to be able to back us. But we also need some structure around that to make sure it's the right structure, and we're working on that constantly.
It's interesting that even in these uncertain times, there's still people out there with an interest in investing in football?
Yeah. Yeah, no. Somebody told me to be the ideal investor is the person you've got to be able to pursue and doesn't want to invest. The people who want to be able to invest at the current time are not necessarily the people you would want. Don't know whether that's true or otherwise, but I think you've got to have a wee bit of caution that people are not trying to come in and pick up things on cheap. Is it the right offer? Is it the right money? Does it recognise where we want to be able to go? What the ambition of the club is to drive forward to be a Premier League club again? And that's the short to medium term ambition. That's what we want. So will they, working with us, allow us to be able to get to that point?
Just always on the subject of the ownership and the investment, would the club still be open to a fan ownership proposal of some sort?
Fan investment, definitely. So that's the structures that we're working on. Let's be honest, we are fan owned. I know it's not necessarily recognised and not necessarily a popular thing to say, but I suspect there's not a single shareholder out there that's not a fan. Why would you be a Falkirk shareholder if you're not a fan? There'll be a few exceptions to that, but I would say very, very few. So in my mind, we're already fan-owned. I think there's a different issue about listening to the voice of the fans and having fan involvement. And again, that's an area that we're looking at, and how do we structure that, and how do we make it attractive, and how do we get it that people feel that they're part of the club, but recognising that the owning a share or owning shares in the club isn't the same as running the club. So there are various models out there, and we've been working and looking at various models out there that would push us towards that kind of, or pull us towards that kind of a more inclusive model. So that's, again, go back to what I'm saying, and I've said it several times now, and I don't mean to kick things down the road, but these things are not easy to be able to implement, but that's the road that we're following just now. Now, that's not to say that we wouldn't listen to somebody else coming along with a huge amount of money and saying we want to be able to invest in the club. We'd listen to both and we'd look at both. But it's got to be the right decision-making process, and we've got to have the right filters in place to make sure that we're getting the right answer for the club.
Another question that came in, quite a detailed question, relates to the stadium. Mm-hmm. And obviously with the current situation, without games, the club pays rent in the south stand. Is there any payment holidays available there, or has that been investigated with the current shutdown? We've
got a complex ownership structure in the stadium. As some, maybe not all, will know, we lease the stadium and lease the stands. So we've got a long-term agreement that this is ours, but we don't own it. So there are outgoings associated with that to the council and others. We're speaking to them all. Everybody's in the same boat and saying, well, actually, how do we work this going forward? Can we renegotiate payment terms? Do we have to be able to? Can we get reductions or holidays or whatever? Like any supplier or any business at the moment, we're constantly negotiating with our suppliers and our people we buy services from. So everything is being debated and everything's been discussed. That's why we've not talked about this in detail, but we kept our finance team running through this. Through the crisis, why Kieran, the commercial director, is still working. So we're in constant negotiations with everybody about limiting as much as possible the cash that's going out the door.
And just in terms of the stadium, and you mentioned it as a complex structure, there's a request here for some sort of document to set out in full the club's involvement and how that's all structured for shareholders before the AGM. Would that be something that the club could produce?
Yeah, I'm happy to give a background note as to what the current structure is. I think that's probably driven, I would guess, from a desire to have it changed. I think there's lots of factors come into that, and it's very, very complicated. But that's not to say that we shouldn't be able to try and pursue some of that. We've had constructive meetings with the council, for example, at the beginning of this year, about how do we work together in partnership to make the most of the assets that are there. And that's, again, it's ongoing now. At the moment, it's frozen. There's nothing being talked about on that side of things, understandably so, because the priorities are elsewhere from the council's point of view. But that will come back, and there's discussions to be made, to be had. We're sitting in a piece of Falkirk that didn't attract an awful lot of investment for years and years and years, and now is. It's a growth zone, for want of a better word, and there's lots of plans for the land surrounding the Falkirk Stadium. So we want to be part of that, and we want to be part of that discussion, and the council want us to be part of that discussion too.
Would it be an aspiration in the club to own the stadium at some point?
I think it's not a straightforward answer. I mean, I think the deal we've got with the stadium at the moment is quite a good deal. And if you change that to be able to buy something, you've got to raise the money to be able to buy it. So you've got to go through a process to be saying, well, actually, is that in the best interest of the club? Is it in the long-term interest of the club? I'm not saying yes, and I'm not saying no, but I think there's a study that's got to be carried out and say, yes, this is desirable, or that's desirable, or here's the direction of travel that we want to go down. The natural feeling is yeah, own the stadium, absolutely. Why wouldn't you want to be able to own that? And I get that. The way my mind works is just, let's tick it off. Is that the right answer, and how do we get there, and how much does it cost? And if you're putting that money into the assets, into the stadium, you're not necessarily putting it into the pitch, obviously, into the players onto the pitch. So there's all of that. We've got to think of all the consequences of that.
And completing the stadium, is that still on the agenda?
It's on mine. Again, it takes an awful lot of money to be able to complete it. Somebody who's working with me people who are working with me share the same frustrations as I do, that we've not got a completed stadium. I want a fourth stand, absolutely want a fourth stand. We've got to work out how do we get it.
Finally, to sum up, a question in from Stephen Forsyth. Moving forward, how are Falkirk FC planning to remedy previous poor decision making from top down, and to stop a managed continual decline and move forward in a more positive direction?
Fingers crossed that we're doing that. What's the answer to that, to Stephen's question? It's a good question. You can only try your best, but by putting the right people in the right jobs, with the right roles and right responsibilities, you put a structure in place to hopefully minimise the wrong decisions being taken. Well, there will always be mistakes. What you've got to be able to do is to learn from them, and make sure you don't make them again. So the whole focus at the moment is about how do we put a structure in place to make sure that we minimise the chance of making the wrong decisions, maximise the chance of making the right ones, and drive the club as a business and as a football entity forward. We will have a strengthening of the board in the next few months. The board is too thin, and it's too light in numbers. So we need to be able to increase the membership of the board. But it goes wider than the board. It's having, as I say, the right people in the right jobs doing the right things. Go back to Lee and David. We've got a couple of guys there who are Falkirk through and through, and I'll use that word again, are leaders, have given us a focus that we didn't have for quite a while, and something to be able to rally around. That's what we should be. So we need to have more of that, more from Lee and David, and more from everybody else attached to the club as well. We've got some brilliant people. We just need to get the best out of them and allow them to show that they're great people, which they are.
So that's more of a long-term view. What about your own short-term plans for the future? Obviously, with the reconstruction coming up, and then whatever falls out from that. What's the next few weeks going to be for yourself and for Falkirk?
Well, a real focus on planning for what's the budgetary outcome for us. What are the decisions that are actually going to be taken around reconstruction mean for Falkirk? How does that mean that we should be planning for, which league we should be planning for, what's the squad looking like, and so on. I've already said that we're doing a lot of work, which people is behind the scenes, and it has to be. A lot of work on the legal structure of the club, the supporters' involvement, possible share issue, raising money, and so on. There isn't a day goes by that I'm not on calls to do with Falkirk. I do other things as well. It's not just Falkirk, but there isn't a day goes by when something's not happening. We've got calls or discussions. There's groups that I set up before the current crisis, working on things like communications, finance, and so on, investment. These are all ongoing. None of these have stopped. So over the next few weeks, it'll be busy, and it's just that some things have to take their time before we roll them out.
Thanks for that, Gary. I think that's quite answers quite a few of the questions that have come through.
Good, I hope so. Obviously, I've probably not covered everything. We'll be having hopefully more of these, David. It's been great to have you help us collect the questions and hopefully give an independent voice to fans' questions. And hopefully we can do more of it.
Hopefully we can all get a fans forum as well. Something
Yeah.
in the future we'll get together again.
Exactly.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Gary.